in your book. On this, there's a very short or small picture of the rupture of the Cascadia subduction zone compared with the rupture of the Sunda Trench in the Indian Ocean. That shows that they're almost identical, not only in their position offshore to where it affected us. Page 16. These little purple pictures. And it shows in hot pink the Sunda Trench that caused that tsunami we did in 2004. And the Cascadia subduction zone is the same size off the coast of California. The same sort of subduction zone. That earthquake in 2004 made the earth wobble on its axis. It was so large. And so we really want to pay attention to this. Those people had no warning that that large of an earthquake would happen there.
Did you know that Mount Shasta was actually an offshore arc that collided with that? I mean, that's why it's more stable.
Exactly. And all that stuff's still grinding together.
Right.
But that's a real eye-opener when you see it in a picture like that, superimposed, because it's 1,000 kilometers, about 677 miles if I have my, 700 miles if I have my figures right. And that's why, I feel like I'm racing against time over on the coast. It's to get people prepared, at least make them aware of what may happen. And believe me, we will survive. I really firmly believe that many, many, many people will survive. There may be injuries, but if you've got some supplies and you've got the ability to help other people and take care of injuries, even more people can survive. And we are a very independent lot living up here, aren't we? I don't think we can depend on San Francisco, Sacramento, or any other areas to help us for many, many days or weeks. And that's another reason that I think we need to look at, do we have the capability in our communities to help each other out, even more than we do now, because we very well may be isolated. So what can we expect? We can expect injuries. We can expect flying glass if we're in an earthquake. We can expect the ground to shake. People are trying to move, which is not a good idea because you really can't walk during a big earthquake. I've tried it. Your first instinct is to get away from whatever's going to hurt you, but you cannot walk while an earthquake is happening because you are going to be hit by falling objects. You may fall and hurt yourself. You're much safer under the table, up against a wall, covering your head and neck to protect yourself, while those few seconds of shaking are going on. And particularly if it's a very big earthquake, it may be a minute of shaking or longer, especially with Cascadia. So you just want to be sure that you take care of yourself, and then you can move. Look at your home, look at your workplace, and make sure that you've moved and braced things that aren't going to fall on you, particularly where you sleep or where you sit on a regular basis, so that you have a chance. You have those extra few seconds to get out of the way or to protect yourself before something falls on you. We know that deaths are rare in California earthquakes. How many times do you hear about somebody dying after an earthquake? Very rarely. You know what it is? It's heart attacks. Oftentimes it's a heart attack from the fear, the stress, and the worry that an earthquake will cause. So a lot of folks are already medically fragile and may have an event based on the stress and the fear. And what I like to do is take away some of the fear and tamp down the stress by having you prepare yourself. Because once you know that you've got your supplies, you know what to do, you've got people that will have your back, your neighbors, your friends, that takes a lot of it away because I'm ready. Now I'm moving into action rather than cowering in fear. So it makes a huge difference in attitude and psychologically for your recovery. We have a lot of structural damage, obviously. I think it was the 92 earthquakes that caused about $62 million in damage in the Humboldt Bay area. I can't even remember how much Loma Prieta. I went into the billions. And other earthquakes from the Southern California area. So that tells me that we have the potential also for those kinds of things to happen here and for it to upset our normal way of living because of structural damage, transportation lifelines, utilities down, medical supplies in short supply, potable water lines may be broken, those kinds of things. So that's what you need to be thinking about as well. These are pictures from Ferndale in Eureka, but they're good examples because of the types of structures. They're wood frame, single-family dwellings, some of them 2 stories. But this one, I want you to look carefully. There's the stairs, and where are they going? Nowhere. You know why? Because this little house, this little 2-story house, was on posted pier, 4 foot tall, 5 foot tall, looking by the stairs, and it went ding, 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 clunk. And when we went to take damage assessment pictures, I have a picture almost identical to that one. That's not my photo, but I have one almost identical to it because I helped do damage assessment after the 1992 earthquake. All the posts and piers were very neatly laid on their sides, right next to the house. And there's the foundation, and there's the house. So they jacked that whole house up, moved it back over on a concrete perimeter, and if you drive down Main Street, Ferndale, right this day, you will see that little house back on its foundation, newly braced and bolted, and the stairs are still there. That's exactly where they were. So this is also a photo from early years, from, I believe, one of the 1940s earthquakes, 50, probably 55. And then this house is in Ferndale as well from the 1992 earthquake. And what you see here is a dark line. Well, that was where the chimney was, and it's all underground. And the house is tilted like this. It's a little harder to see from that perspective. But they also straightened that and put a new foundation and built the chimney back up. So anything is possible there, but that's the style. And then some, but none of them fell down. That was a 7.2 earthquake, right by them. But nothing fell down. So wood frame, single story, 2 stories, typically do survive, even their little cattywampus. But you're safer there than you would be in a high rise in a downtown area, of course, if you were visiting out of area. Our single family homes, oftentimes what we have is glass breakage, chimneys fall down, utility lines are ruptured. If they're on a soft story, in other words, you've got your garage underneath, they may collapse if you don't have cripple wall sheathing and your foundation bolted. So those are kinds of things that you need to be aware of. And this was, can you see the car? It's kind of little. There's a car. They're getting a new car out of this earthquake, aren't they? And probably a new house too, because I don't know whether that's repairable or not. But the house completely went over, and the soft story, in other words, the empty space, allowed it to tip because it wasn't braced and there was no triple wall, and it probably was not bolted to its foundation. So those are kinds of things that you need to be thinking about as well. Mobile homes, if you're living in a mobile, you need to know in an earthquake in particular that, and even a mudslide, if the ground is moving under you, that you may have ruptured gas lines. Your foundation is your wheels. If they're not braced or bolted or tied down in some way to a pad, that the mobile can shake off of the wheel or off of the pad. So that's something to think about. The biggest thing we worry about with mobiles is fire, because they're very susceptible, and because it's all plastics, foam, insulation, and so on, it goes up and it's very, very flammable. So that's something for you to be thinking about as well. What about water supplies, things that are already fragile in this area too? Gas lines, your electric power, roads, garbage and sewer services are pretty fragile when you think about normal day-to-day. It seems like everything's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, that we're okay. But what if the road is down? What if they can't get to you? What do you do with your garbage and your disposables? What do you do with human waste? You may have enough property that you could bury it, but if you live in town or you don't have anywhere to dispose of it, then you need to be thinking along the lines of how would I secure the human waste that don't cause an infection control problem, and even more so, don't have animals coming and being attractant to things that garbage and waste that you need to take care of. So those are kinds of planning things that we want to think about as a community for resource, and to get that set up ahead of time, because when it happens, it's not the time to make that decision and figure it out. You need to know what you're going to do ahead of time for sure. Communications. Anybody? Is there a payphone in Happy Camp? I haven't seen it.
There's two.
Yeah.
There's
Where
one
are
on
they?
next door.
That's one of my colleagues.
Okay, good. Well, you know, in talking with PacBell and GTE and all the other phone services, they tell me that payphones, typically that line and trunk service will be up, mainly because there aren't as many residential callers going off hook and causing busy signal. So the payphones oftentimes, because they are available and don't have as many people on that trunk switching system, will be available. So now everybody's going to rush to payphones. That's not going to be true. But you have your residential lines oftentimes and cell phones, and they may or may not be up and running after an earthquake especially, and even with power lines and other things down unless they have generator backup. So cell service is iffy at best sometimes, depending on the service that you have, and if you don't have battery or electrical to recharge batteries, then you've got another question in mind. And so that's another system where radios in town or door-to-door or walking and knowing your neighbors and making sure everybody's taken care of can really be a huge advantage, knowing who's fragile and who needs help. Now, text messages, I am told, and I think this has worked in other areas, because that's not using the voice protocol, your text messaging system may work longer than anything else. And that could really be a benefit if you're conserving battery power, because it's the little packets of digital information going over the radio waves rather than the voice protocol to the switching system. So be thinking in terms of that. If you want to make a call out or you can text someone, you may be able to get that out for your out-of-area call, and someone who can then make calls for you to other family members to say, she's safe. You know we got a text message at this time, and we can pass that along. So, what else here? Some of the things that can hurt you. How about unsecured hazards? Cabinets, furniture, appliances, all of the kinds of stuff that you have in your house. Vases, books, pictures that are unsecured, anything like that. I have actually had all those things fall. Fortunately, they didn't hit me, but they scared my cat a couple of times, really bad. And so those are things that I have taken care of now. But I have a gas stove. I used to have we had wood only for about 18 years. And now with arthritis, I can't do the kindling and the carry, so we have gas. But I got that gas stove. It's sitting on a hearth, looks just like a wood stove, and I have it bolted to the hearth because I don't want that piping to come down, and I don't want the gas connection to break either. I'm relying on that for heating my house. That's what I thought. So anything in your kitchen, and that picture is of a library with all the shelves that were just sitting. They just went right on over. Whereas the little paperback racks, they just kind of jumped around happily and then sat still. So that tells you that the motion of the earthquake can set up the motion of heavy objects, and also throw them quite a long ways in a room too. For instance, if you have a heavy vase up on a shelf, can throw it 1.5 times its own distance of where it is. What about kitchen cabinets and all that? What a mess. Good grief. If you don't do anything else, put some latches on your kitchen cabinets. Even the childproof latches help a lot. And it also keeps kids out of your kitchen cabinets until they figure them out. So let's talk about a couple of other disasters. So now, what I call the cascade of disasters, the domino effect after an earthquake. And sometimes after winter rains, you get the landslides. We already talked about that. What about destructive fires, hazardous material releases? And in this area, is everybody on propane? Pretty much? Natural?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's near.
Yeah. So if you're not affected so much by earthquake, but how do you get your refills on your propane? You know, if the truck can't come by. So that could be an issue if your transportation lifelines are damaged or something. And then there could be fire. in town if something else happened, or if people are using a place for a warming station and not using it appropriately or have open flame, anything can happen. So you have to kind of be thinking in terms of those things happening after an event too. More likely in the winter here, and most folks know how to be safe as far as taking care of oneself during the winter time when it's so cold and you're trying to set up warming stations. Other things that might befall you could be dam failure. We were talking about the landslides on the river, damming up the river. That's a potential, not a high risk, but something that could if you're talking about all hazards here. So, dam failure could be a landslide that creates a damming effect on the river, and when that breaks through, then you have the high water flow coming through. It's there. Liquefaction, that's along the coast after the 1906 earthquake. Those ladies in the long dresses there, they're looking at where the land slumped under the high water table. There's lands with high water table along the coast and unconsolidated soils and sand. When the earth shakes, that high water table allows the sand to have lubrication, and it sinks and moves around. And when the earthquake finally stops, you have all these steps coming down along the coast from liquefaction. It just sinks and rearranges the earth, so to speak. You have surface ruptures after an earthquake, and we sometimes have those if they don't repair the cracks in the road and the ice and water get in there and then split the road too. So there's many ways that can happen. It's a disaster just as well. Along the coast, we have roadways that go to the sloughs, and so roads can dip. And we always advise people, if after an earthquake and you're on the roadway, go slow, because this can happen. You're going 40 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, you can see this side and you can see the other side, but you can't see in between. You can find yourself down in the lower section, very much like they did in 1980. I think I have a picture of the Tompkins Hill overpass that fell in the 1980s. And the hospital there looks very much like St. Joe's. It's actually Whittier, after the Whittier Narrows earthquake in the 70s. But that T formation allowed the building to stand, but it didn't have damage. St. Joe's in Eureka has a similar configuration with their new wing on it, and that also helps brace that earthquake and make it more earthquake-proof, and it's been retrofitted as well. Don't forget your pets. Everybody got large livestock, house pets. You want to provide for them, both with food and ability to take care of themselves, too. So, what should you expect after a major earthquake? You can expect that law enforcement is going to address the incidences of grave public safety, if they can get there. Firefighters are going to do the same. They're going to suppress major fires, as many as they can do at any one time. So how many fire engines can you expect to come to Happy Camp? Got CAL FIRE, got the Ranger Station. How many engines in the volunteer fire company are coming? 2. That's not very many when you look at all the structures around here. And so being able to fight a small fire, like the size of a wastebasket, if you can put that out before it got larger, wouldn't that be a good thing? And we're going to learn how to do that tomorrow, so that everybody can have a fire extinguisher and you can take care of that. I carry one in my car, and I always have to remember to take it out and tilt it down so that the powder loosens up, because once it's been in the car, it jogs down and just becomes a cake inside of that fire extinguisher. EMS personnel, all of you will have some basic training on how to open an airway, how to do triage for a multi-casualty incident, so that you can figure out and code and triage about 20 individuals at a time in less than 5 minutes, or 3 minutes, really. We'll watch a short video on how to do that. And then Lynn and Flo will walk us through that tomorrow afternoon. So that's an excellent skill to have. School bus accident, multi-casualties in a traffic accident, an event, illnesses, all those kinds of things, really valuable skills. So, talking about earthquake, if we've got survivors, they're going to be just us. It's going to be you and me on the road, in our neighborhood, at work, first 12 to 24 hours after a big event, especially if it's on the Cascades of Giants. So it's you and me taking care of one another. And I sure am glad that all of you know what I know by the end of this course. Because if I had to rely on you, I would feel confident that you could save my life. You could do the best with what you've got with you. And I urge you to go and get a really good medical kit so you can save my life in style, okay? I'd appreciate it. You might have to fight small fires. You might have to do some damage assessment so that it can be reported up to county OES so that they then will know what level of disaster to declare. Is it just a county, a local thing that we can handle ourselves? Do we need state assistance? We need the governor involved? Do we need to get a presidential declaration? How much damage is there? And they're collecting that for every corner of the county. So they're looking at good, accurate information from the people who live here, who know approximate values, and can say, we have the school damaged, we have the store damaged, we don't have potable water, or it will be used up soon. We need food, we need medical supplies, and we need additional personnel to come in and help us. So if he can trust, if David is the contact, if he can trust, he knows that you are aware of this, and he knows that you live here and that you have a good judgment about it and good common sense, he can then take that information, pass it on up, they map it, they document it, and send it on up the line. And they say, yes, the people of Happy Camp are okay, but they need these resources. And then he can report back to you when you can expect those to arrive. And I bet you it's not going to be for a little while. So there you need to be thinking in terms of having supplies of your own to share and also to take care of your own people. So let's talk about some tsunamis for just a second. This slide says, do you know if you live or work in a tsunami zone? I think we could all say no. However, how many of you visit a tsunami zone from time to time? You know, you may go up the coast of Oregon. You may go to Eureka. You may go down to San Francisco. This information, as I said earlier, is transferable to any place along any coast, anywhere in the world. You need to know the same things. There's two things about earthquakes, which are there's an earthquake that can cause a tsunami that affects you, even if it's thousands of miles away. New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Japan, an earthquake there can affect us because the tsunami created by that earthquake comes to our shore. If we have a local earthquake, that's your warning. That says, pay attention to me. This is a big enough event that I might have created a tsunami. You need to know what to do. So what we're going to do now is learn a little bit about the actions which you need to take after a tsunami. So let's watch this animation. Remember I talked about the land and the subducting under? So this animation, I hope you can see it well enough, shows how that happens. So where it's bending is land, and going under is a subduction zone. And the land springs free, and the entire column of water above it in the ocean is affected, not just the surface, but the whole thing. And so it creates a tsunami. And so when that springs forward, the water may drop, but of course it replaces and goes back to its natural point of gravity. And then the wave spreads out. But that wave goes the entire length of the coast of California. Not just the one little place, but the entire length. So if you want to practice at home, fill up your bathtub halfway and drop a rock in it and watch that ring of water go out. It's the whole length of the bathtub, isn't it? So part of what it does there is it's trying to show you that you really can't get away from tsunami. It comes in very quickly, up to 500 miles an hour. And it is the entire length. And so the only option that you have is to go inland, go high, and move yourself as fast as you can. Preferably on foot if you are close to the coast, because roadways may be damaged and other people may be trying to drive and creating traffic jams. We know that the first wave after an earthquake has created tsunami. It may not be the highest, and that in fact was true in Crescent City in 1964. The Good Friday earthquake in Alaska created a tsunami that came to Crescent City in the early morning hours. And it was about a 5 foot, I believe. And a number of people thought, well, that wasn't so bad. They went back downtown and were caught by the 11-foot wave that came in next.
Mm.
And 11 or 12 people died in Crescent City that day. Totally unnecessary, unfortunately, because they did not have information about what the effects might be. And it's so unfortunate because it wasn't anything that needed to happen. And now you know that if you feel an earthquake or you learn about an earthquake in a distant place that causes tsunami to come to us, that you can stay out of harm's way. And remember, the earthquake here is always your warning signal. Take action immediately. Don't stop to listen to the radio. Don't call your neighbor. Don't go, I wonder if that was big enough to cause a tsunami. Well, if you felt it on the coast, it may be. So take action. Don't stand there and watch to see it because you will not be able to outrun it. Another thing, this was taken from the Koh Samui Coast for British visitors for a lot of coastline, and enjoying the surf, and then all of a sudden the water started to recede. They go, oh, what's not there? Well, guess what? Then that's the tsunami wave that came in. And then they realized, I better not be here, and turned to run. And I understand that they did make it. This is a foreshortened telephoto lens, so they did make it. But you don't want to be in that position. The minute that you see something really unusual, such as a drawdown, and I'm talking the entire coastline, that is a clue that there is something unusual, a natural event going on that you need to get away from. And so that is another clue that you can use, especially when you're on the coastline. We can have tsunamis happen from, I think I just missed something. Let me go back here. Aha, here we go. I wanted you to see the video from the Japanese earthquake that happened in 2011 because it shows what the incoming tsunami surge looks like, particularly in a populated area on the coast. And we use this for the Eureka Humboldt area, especially along the bay right here. I apologize, I slid right past that. Let's see if I can get there. The sound here is a Japanese announcer in a helicopter who was doing a news report and happened to be in the helicopter. I don't think you can hear him. You can hear a little bit, but you can hear the panic in his voice, even if you don't speak Japanese. See the entire line along the coast?
How big was that?
確認できますでしょうか、1、2、3、3波、4波、それ以上に大きくなっており
4 waves.
こちらのぜひ、左側のアンパンに向けて押し寄せているのが確認できます。
I think the only other thing was to be in the tsunami would be above it and seeing your home, your family, your
大
friends
きな津波
below.
が複数波によって現在、海岸に押し寄せているのが確認
And
できま
don't
す。
forget, this is a very low-lying area all along that coast. For miles inland, we have hills. We can escape higher ground. It's a little hard to see, but that's the inland area. And this is a bay where the tsunami is coming in, and the effect is magnified because it is a bay with the cliffs on either side. And so it is sweeping in and picking up the buildings as they go. And you'll see some secondary effects in a minute. The fire, buildings are being moved and tossed, and utility lines are ruptured. Cooking fires are very common. The braziers are common in Japan in the houses, and nearly all of them are wood frame. This one is a famous video coming happening in the agricultural lands over the greenhouses, and it picks up, tsunami picks up all that debris and brings it forward. That's how they had fishing trawlers that were 80 feet long in the middle of town, 2 miles inland. The power of water is pretty astonishing.
How much on 10-story buildings or something?
2-story buildings. And this is an interesting aspect. This is the freeway overpass with the filled berm, but the water down on the bottom right of the screen was beginning to come through and pour down and break the roadway on the bottom floor. So those people on the high ground of the highway were standing on tops of their trucks. You didn't have time to see all of it. But the power of water, you think you can run away from it, and you really need to go as far in and as high as you can. You really can't stand on the coast and watch that come in and then think you can turn and run. It just doesn't work. So I wanted you to at least be able to see those effects. Did you see things like that on television or other places when that happened in 2011? Tsunami is better known now than it ever has been. My job has been easier since 2004 when we had the Sunda Trench event and the tsunami in Thailand and Cambodia, because it was the greatest full-scale drill the world has ever had for tsunami and earthquake. Every single person in the world that day got a chance to see it up close and personal and firsthand about what can happen after a great earthquake. So it made my job a little bit easier because we don't have to imagine. We know exactly what can happen. And it's unfortunate. It's taken a lot of lives, but it also has given us the opportunity to be able to say, this is what happens. So take warning, be prepared, know your hazards, and take action immediately. When we have a local tsunami, we want to take warning, an official warning, very seriously, but there may not be time for that. So as I said, when you feel the earthquake, that is your warning. We've gotten away from just going, oh, my instincts are good, I'm going to pay attention to this. I need to verify it with a radio or a newspaper or a cell phone or an iPad or something like that. No, you don't. You need to know that this happened and the effect is going to be immediately, and I need to take action immediately. I don't have to verify it. I felt the earthquake. Well, I'm on the coast and I feel that earthquake. I know that there's potential for tsunami. I'm going to move my body out of the way and wait and find out. Then I can go back and enjoy the coast later on without being in harm's way. So that's something you need to do. For a distant tsunami, same thing. You have good information because there's time. If the earthquake happens somewhere else far away, we have generally a minimum of 2 to 3 hours for an event in British Columbia and Washington area to come to our coast. 4 to 6 hours depending on Alaska or Japan or Solomon Islands, New Guinea, all of those areas that are far, far away. But you might feel the ground shaking, a drawdown, we already talked about, or you might hear a roar from the ocean that's louder than any other ocean wave roar, even storm surges, that you've ever heard. It's so loud that you have to pay attention. You turn and look to see what's going on. I've seen video with that noise, and it's just overwhelming. It's really, really loud. The distant source tsunamis are a little bit easier to deal with because we have time, for one thing. But the other thing is that we also have warning systems in place. Offshore in California, we have what we call DART buoys, D-A-R-T, deep ocean, real-time, deep ocean analysis and real-time data. And so those are placed along the coastline from Washington south to Southern California. And what they're doing is they're measuring the changes in the ocean level after an earthquake and tsunami event in importance. They have them would be west of Hilo, Hawaii, the Pacific Warning Center, Alaska Tsunami Warning Center monitors those as well. And so that information can come to us many hours before a tsunami hits our shores. But you have to know about that. And that's what the emergency alert system radios will do for hour by or even minute by minute basis about the event that's coming to us. The problem is that if you're in a very isolated area, you're out backpacking along the British Columbia coast, you may not know any of that. And that's why you want to be very, very careful about watching ocean changes and things. Or if you can have some sort of radio, some of them, actually the satellite radios are pretty cool, shortwave. It's a little heavy to take on a backpacking trip, but if you're going to be in harm's way, you might want to consider that at some point in time. Official warnings can come to you from media, the TV, radio, airplane announcements, as I said, Civil Air Patrol. They may put all of Coast Guard, we have a Coast Guard station at McKinleyville. They put Coast Guard with speakers, loudspeakers in the air for events that we've had along our coast recently. And you may hear sirens, if there are sirens available. I don't think you have any in this area. About far north as they've gone, Oric, which is the community most at risk for tsunami along the coast on the east, on the west, excuse me. And we have had, as you can see, quite a few tsunamis, as well as some injuries. And yet people still do the same things again and again, not thinking that it will be them this time. So that's unfortunate because it very well could be you if you find yourself in that circumstance. And we have had, these pictures are of the Crescent City Harbor. This was after the 1964, that was the parking lot at the harbor in 1964. And this was in 2011, the event in November. That was the second tsunami, and there's the berm, the seawall. And it caused many, many millions of dollars in damage.
And the top one was Alaska, and the bottom was Japan.
That, it's, yes. 1964 Good Friday, and then in November. So we have potential along the North Coast. In your booklet is the map that I was going to call your attention to. I believe it's on page 20. It's on 15. So, but there's more information about how will I know if tsunami is coming. So this is an excellent booklet just to leave in the car and take with you, especially if you're going to go over to the coast or backpacking along the British Columbia and Pacific Rim Trail. All of those things. It talks about the official warnings and nature's warnings, and also what to do if you're outside of the map area. If you feel an earthquake, you know that you felt that you can go inland, you can go high. If you don't, you're going to have to pay attention to the other warnings that you might see if there should be tsunami. Definitely. So let's move on to another kind of water event, floods, which you're more familiar with, I think. In this area, it's pretty basic. A flood occurs whenever there's more water than the water channel can carry. It's one of the most hazardous things we have in California, in Northern California, because we have 6 wild and scenic rivers up here, plus many, many creeks that can overflow into high water events. And that causes about 75% of our declared disasters as well. The water events are the ones that just go where the water flows. The low-lying areas are affected. You really can't hold it back. Are there enough sandbags in all the world to protect Happy Camp? I don't know. And you also have to worry about mud flow and landslide as well when you have a high water event or steady rain. So they can be fast, like a flash flood. They very well may be if you have mud flows with it. Or they could be a slow developing thing like we get along the Eel River on the coast. We can see that coming for days because the watershed to the south of us, which is the funny thing to me, that our rivers run north from south to north. On the Van Dusen, it'll be raining down in Covelo and the Eel, and that whole watershed is flowing north to Ferndale, which is really odd. It took me a long time to figure that out. But it takes 5 to 6 hours for that water to reach where it reaches us at the Eel River and Fernbridge and becomes flooding in that low-lying area. So you need to be aware of where you are and what the potential is for that, especially during the winter months. Causes of floods, rain, definitely. Perhaps the snow melt, we wish. Dam failure, those kinds of things. Maybe the soil is so dry, the water's just running off, especially in the early events that we have or the soil is so saturated that it contains. So that is potential as well. One of the biggest things that we have along the coast and some of the more populated areas of California is that they're building businesses in floodplains. And not everybody is buying flood insurance. They're not, in terms of the planning, paying attention to that as much as they are getting the industry into the area. So it's difficult because residential property and land is hard to find in some areas. And so they're building in floodplains, and they probably should not based on experience in previous years. So I don't know that you have that situation so much here, but it's a good thing to keep in mind wherever you buy property. And then this is a pretty common sense thing. Flooding is caused by intense rainfall, duration, topography, does it pool or pond, what kind of soil conditions do you have, and then do you have ground cover or not, so that it secures the soil so that they don't slide and cause that runoff to go into your rivers, damming the river, and so on. So all of those can become issues. And most of your risks up here, I think, are having more to do with lack of any place for the water to run off. Once the river is high, you've got the canyons, and then the banks, the water exceeds the banks, and then it's just getting, and eventually it gets into channels where it can get into populated areas. And you've already had experiences with that, so I won't belabor that point. I think you have a pretty good idea of where those flood events can happen. But the damage, of course, increases when it gets into the floodplain, and also if people have built homes or businesses in those areas too. You can definitely have major impact on the population because you have got buildings, businesses impacted, damage, and those have to be rebuilt. You're without those services for a while, or people are out of their homes. And so, you really need to think carefully about where you place those buildings and where you build your own home. Let's do a little bit about wildfires, something that we're all very aware of right now. The classes of wildfires are the surface fire, the ground fire, and crown. And those three are probably the three that we talk most about in California, too, in our populated areas up in the mountainous areas, because we have potential for wildland fire everywhere here in Northern California. And we're actually coming into that season pretty shortly here. So people are encouraged to build their defensible space, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow when we do our fire module. But if you want to find your local fire hazard for your area, and you can, I've pulled that happens to be Hayfork Weaverville because our instructor over there is from Hayfork. But you can find your hazard maps if you take this with you and look up the URL. It's County Siskiyou, CAUS, Public Health and Community Development Department. It's right at the top of this diagram up there, and that's the same one that's on the screen up there. You can click on any of the hazard maps. You can find your SRA fire hazard severity, dam inundation from Iron Gate, Boyle Dam, Box Canyon dam inundation, Lahar zones from Shasta. There should be a volcanic flow. All of those things are available to you to look up almost down to your own parcel. So that's a really good tool. If you haven't ever looked there, I encourage you to take the might affect your community. And those are things that you want to use for your own resource planning as well when you're talking about the kind of community effort you want to put out for fire, for flood, any of the other hazards that come along. Okay, so let's talk a little bit here about our 7-step plan. In the back of your shaky ground are those steps. And so to begin, we want to identify our hazards and begin to fix them. And so on page 18, in your shaky ground, are some of the hazard hunt ideas. 18 and 19 are some of the things that you can do in your own home or workplace to identify the hazards that might cause you harm or cause difficulty for your friends and neighbors, and things that you can do to help yourself immediately to make sure that you at least have done what you need to do the best you can to take care of yourself and to protect your home and family. You also can look at, and you might want to write this one down, 9 hazards, and put it on that same sheet that myhazards.calema.ca.gov. And that gives you a website that will list all of the hazards for your area, almost down to your own parcel number, and also will give you a description and a mapping of those hazards that are done so far. I'm not 100% sure that everything in this area has been done, but close. And you can kind of extrapolate, because you already know we're affected by floods, fires, and so on. But it shows you also the mitigation options that you have, the things that you can do. So that's an excellent tool for you to use in conjunction with the hazard hunt and the other things that you can do for yourself at your own home and workplace.
Do you know if, since CalEMA is going back to Cal OES, are they going to change that?
I have no
URL?
idea.
Because I know they went from OES to EMA, and now they're going back to OES.
I know. This is the 3rd or 4th time I've been through this with them, so I don't know. I know they're going to keep the website up because we are doing all of this hazard mitigation planning, and they'll have to leave it and call it something. The portal may be changed, but I suspect that the mapping and stuff will still be the same. That it is now.
Hopefully they don't both.
Yeah, it gets very frustrating for me because now I have to go change every piece of paper I put that on, every slide, every time I
Yeah,
talk.
it's ridiculous.
Just call it something and leave it alone, please. I'd like to be able to. Yeah, I've called it State OES for so many years that I just thought, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there's been any announcements. I haven't seen any yet, but if there would be any announcements, they're going to change this URL.
I was just looking at all the badges I've ever had for work in my life, and I've had the OES, the EMA, the CAL.
Back
So
and
I
forth.
just picked one off the wall and put it on, and got the same thing. Don't have to buy any badge. But that is a good website. And here are some of the kinds of things that you would see when you go there. The dam failure and inundation mapping for your area, flood zones, earthquake faults, and wildland fire information. Those are all just very general. Some of them are along the coast and southern land, but it's your general area. And you may see a rural forest around your small settlement. So, but it's worth checking out. The last couple of things, of course, on some of those, you can do that hazard mitigation in your home by bracing, vaulting, moving things around, just to be sure that you'll be safe. You know, I grew up in New Mexico. Nothing ever happens there. You know, short of a hard winter or a blizzard. And I moved to California, and my first experience with an earthquake was 1980. I worked at the hospital in Livermore. And that was a scary experience because I was up on the 2nd floor. All of the fire doors closed and we couldn't get out. And nobody had anticipated that the Greenville Fault would go at that high of a magnitude. Well, they had a hard lesson to learn. A lot of us who were staff were very unhappy to be stuck, you know. And we had to, I wasn't a patient care person. I worked for administration, but I was up doing an edit and an audit of all of the supply data that was at the workforce stations, and we couldn't get out for about 20 minutes. Well, what if they're going to fire? You know, so those kinds of things you have to be thinking in terms of. So bolting, bracing, knowing your hazards. We had a bad experience, so we fixed that. And each experience gives you some information that you can use for the next time. Oh, and this is part of the mapping and hazards hunt on 20 and 21 too. Same pictures available to you. So let's do a little bit about disaster plans. We already know we got to drop, cover, and hold on. Find a safe spot in every room, and learn to protect yourself wherever you are, right? We're going to learn tomorrow about fire extinguishers. So if you don't have one, it's a good idea to have one for your home and car. And in the workplace especially, OSHA law generally require them so that you know that you can put out a small fire if that should occur before it becomes a large fire. And you need to be trained. A lot of you have already had your CPR and first aid. It's not included in this course because we are working with large multi-casualty incidents where we don't do CPR. But I do encourage everybody to have it and keep current with it if you haven't already, because it's a very valuable life skill. What about utility shutoffs? It might be a little bit easier for some. All you have to do is water in your propane tank and turn it off. But you may be other places. You might be in a motel. You might be visiting friends. You need to kind of be aware of how their utility system is set up if you are in an area that's subject to earthquake especially. Something good to know. So learn those things as a matter of course. And our instructors tomorrow will teach you. And we have a mock-up of an actual gas meter. If you should be in town and there is natural gas, how to shut that off and how to be aware of what to do. And then, of course, in the neighborhoods, one of the things I'm most concerned about is frail elders, anybody with mobility problems, folks that need assistance and might not necessarily ask for it. They're independent on a good day, but today we had an event and we need to check on those folks and be sure they're okay. So we need to know who's got those special skills. We need to know where those folks are that might need a little helping hand or extra help during a major event. Or someone who might need to come into the warming station in a cold winter day, that kind of thing. Who might benefit from all extra food if they don't have the heat or the ability to cook. So those are things that you can do also as a service for your friends and neighbors. So you know almost now, at least as far as tsunami is concerned, at the beach, equals, if you're at the beach, it equals for any earthquake, get off the beach. If you're in a hazard zone, equals 20-second earthquake, get out of that hazard zone. And I like to say, if you feel any earthquake in your hazard zone, just get off the beach and get out of the hazard zone until you get it all clear and you know that it's safe to go back. If you're in the safe zone, don't go anywhere. You don't need to go anywhere. One of the greatest hazards is people on the roadway that are fleeing something that they don't have to worry about. My friend Judy, who teaches this class often, says that one of her neighbors, after, I believe it was the 2011 rock and roller we had, went up to the top of Fickle Hill, which is sort of like all of you going up over to Fort Jones, because you felt an earthquake here. And she was afraid the tsunami was going to get her, and she was perfectly safe. She was in the middle of Eureka, 2 miles from any hazard zone. But she put herself in harm's way by the coast, along the bay, and up the hill to get to the next safe spot. And thank goodness she had time to do that. If there had been a tsunami, she'd have been in harm's way and perhaps died in tsunami. And that's not necessary. So know where you are, know where the zones are, and know where you can stay and where you need to evacuate. And your mapping will tell you that. And then, of course, if you live in a flood zone, you need to know what the evacuation plan is for that. Keep flood insurance if you're in a floodplain. Anybody got flood insurance up here? I don't know very many people that buy it.
I'm a special zone and I have to get it.
You had to?
Here's 1% flood. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is that?
About it.
Where is
So
that?
it's 12 hours.
I'll be darned. I wonder if that's in the floodplain from the dam failure.
It's been rezoned in 2010. It was rezoned and it went from, I think, A to B or something
Yeah, I'm really surprised that there is such a thing. It must be dam inundation or something
I
like
think
that.
it's just kids bankruptcy.
Yeah, or there was,
Yeah.
there might have been history there too from.
No, the house has been there for 100 years and I haven't seen any water.
That's interesting, because I'm surprised that there is.
Yeah, I bought it for 2 years, but I had to buy it.
Where I'm living, there's a lot, and people choose to buy it, or I can see that FEMA is, in particular, is moving toward the system of not assisting if you don't have flood insurance with rebuilding costs, because if you're in a flood-rate area and you don't have the insurance, and you are constantly applying for assistance after a flood, why aren't you buying the insurance? So it's like anything else. And then, yeah. And so, before you buy property elsewhere, look and see, am I in a flood zone? Because if you are, you might need to buy flood insurance, and they may be forcing people with mortgages to do that. And that's one of the ways that that's going to happen as part of the mortgage package, or like having mortgage insurance, that kind of thing. So that could happen too. Well, I don't know whether you know of whether radios work here. Some areas, I have one in my car all the time, but it doesn't work everywhere. Depends on which canyon I'm in. And so having that phone tree, if it's an event where you have lead lines still up, is a good thing if there's a hazard coming towards you. But no weather radios along the coast are excellent, because every radio station, every TV station is obligated to have that information available and be able to broadcast it immediately should there be an alert. So it's something that you can pull up, and if you have the NOAA weather radio, it's dedicated only to that, plus the weather that you hear, the marine weather. So that's a good thing to have if you're traveling anywhere. Have a little NOAA weather radio. They're like $20 and save your life, especially if you're working or living or traveling in an area that you're not familiar with, not necessarily along our coast, but elsewhere. So for a fire, obviously you want to probably already have your garden hose long enough to reach any area in your defensible space. And you want to have a water pump if you have a streamer pool, so that you can also pull additional water up. You want to be sure your chimneys and stovepipes have a spark arrestor on top, particularly in this area where wildland fire is so prevalent. And keep your fire tools handy. Your portable shovel. I carry one in my car all the time. It also helped last winter when I got stuck. When I poured dirt on the fire, it didn't crack. Not that one. That's a new one because I broke it. The other one. That's a better one. The other one was a cheap one. I'll just throw that in. Boy, was I ever glad I had that, because it would have been me with a stick of wood piling dirt. But fire tools are critical, and something that you should keep handy all the time, especially this time of year. And we throw this in because some people still don't know what municipal space means when we talk about the 100 feet away from a structure, so that you have, and I should imagine you've heard this many, many times over the past, but some folks down on the coast don't know what that means. You don't ever worry about it. But I'm very aware of it. And I lived in New Mexico in mountains where and we had a wildland fire in Casitas in May when I was home. And it was pretty scary because it was coming up the backside of the mountain, and you could see the flames at the top of the mountain, and then it was going to come right on down, and they were able to stop it. But defensible space is critical, and it's a very important tool that you can use for yourself to keep yourself safe. Excuse me. In planning to communicate, if you have a card, just something in your wallet that has all your important numbers, your friends, family, anybody that you would like to call out of state, who can then relay where you're going if you've got to get away from the fire or a flood or whatever. You can call an out-of-state contact, and that person can make all your calls for you. And then while you're doing the emergency activity, you don't have to worry. And that other person calling back in is more likely to be able to make those calls than you calling out in an emergency zone. And also talking cell phone battery, maybe you don't want to use up your battery, but it would be nice to have that contact out of state who could make those calls. So put a card or just a slip of paper in your wallet so that you've got that information handy at all times. I don't know about you, but in an emergency, numbers go right out of my head, and I really either need to have them in my phone directory or my wallet card, which I carry, so that they have my daughter's phone number, they've got my ICE in case of emergency numbers, neighbors at my house, all of those kinds of things that somebody might need to know about me that wouldn't know them ordinarily if they run into me in an emergency. You want to know if you've got children in school, what those plans are. Make sure you've got copies of important documents in a safe place, obviously. And insurance, forced or not, you definitely might want to consider that as well. And then your disaster supply kits, and I have my kit that I carry in my car all the time. And I've got duplicates of some things in the duffel bag. It's a wheeled duffel bag, makes it easy for me to tow. You're welcome to come up and take a look at this on break. Make sure that you have a good idea of what to put in a kit. I used to backpack a lot, and it's the same kinds of things that I would take for car camping or a 3-day backpack trip. So, be thinking in those terms. Nothing special. I walked around the house with that and said, well, let's see, here's my list. Let's see, step number 3 in here. So that is page 23. Okay, I've got that. I can put that in. Okay, I've got that. Put that in. You'd be surprised how much stuff you've got in your house that you can put in your supply kit. And guess what? Now you know where it is. You don't have to hunt it down in the house during an emergency. You've got it right there. And if everybody had a kit in their car, would make me a whole lot happier because I wouldn't have to worry about you. And you wouldn't have to get back home to get your supplies. You'd have them right there, wouldn't you? So that would be nice. You can have a kit in your car. You can have one at home. You can have one at your office. And you can make one for pets.
I guess because being up there, one thing we found is to rotate out your batteries and also not to leave them in the device because of the corrosion.
Did everybody hear that? Take your batteries out of your flashlights and radios in your kit so that they don't corrode, which is an excellent tip.
But they'll also rotate them out.
And take them out, and also rotate them. I try and do that on 4th of July, fireworks, New Year's Eve, fireworks, and change everything out and eat up my supplies. I've already eaten up my Clif Bars because I got stuck in traffic, and I thought, well, I'll just stand out here and sit on the tailboard and eat my Clif Bars. So I've got to replace those. But I've got a little bit of hard candy, comfort food, and I carry water in my car. I didn't put the water bottles out, but we've got water over there. But just enough to get me by, just so that I could be comfortable for 46 hours.
Another thing that might come in handy is if you have rechargeable batteries combined with portable solar panels.
Oh.
You make them fairly small now. There's some designed. They're not too
He's got
That's excellent. Solar panels for a lot of things are available. Crank radios with solar panels. In fact, that's the one thing I didn't pull out of my car. I have one of the radios that's a crank with a solar panel on the top. And that's the only way. It actually used to belong to my daughter because she wanted to take a boombox with her everywhere. And so we had the solar panel radio, and you could listen to that anywhere you could get sun and a radio signal. So it's perfect, no batteries, I love it. So these kinds of things are the basics that I personally felt I needed to be comfortable, to take care of myself and not be an impact on the system. But I can help other people now that I've got myself taken care of. So what else can we do? In step 4 is identify our weaknesses and begin to fix them. And so in step 4, which turns out to be on page 24, it talks here about the cripple walls and sheathing and bracing and bolting, all the kinds of things that you need to do to be sure that your house and your home, places where you work, are okay so that you won't be harmed. And these pictures, again, are some that we've experienced. I've taken some pictures. This is actually from the Northridge earthquake. This was where they had the parking garages under the apartments. Those are the tail ends of cars under the apartment buildings that are perfectly fine, apparently.
A boyfriend I had, his girlfriend is in one of those cars.
Yeah.
She died.
That's very sad.
Yeah.
And then here are the chimneys that completely pulled away. And here's that yellow house with the chimney, and you can kind of see the perspective that the house is tilting a bit, the chimney's pulled away from it. Definitely. So structural hazards, unreinforced masonry. And then also with mobiles, that gives a good illustration of how to bolt and brace that foundation to a pad so that it won't rock. And that also works for wind, high wind in winter too. So that's a good thing. And if you're renting, make sure that you're looking at not renting in unreinforced masonry or tuck under parquet de soft story where the garage is underneath unless it's bolted or braced. What kind of retrofitting you can ask. Sometimes in California, there are very few places that have it, but it's a law now that everything unreinforced masonry has to be retrofitted. Older buildings that don't pass inspection have to be retrofitted, so you might need to ask. And then you can secure tall furniture, bookcases, anything that's, even pictures with glass, you can put 2 bolts in the wall, the molly bolts, and wind the wire around those and then move those in. And I haven't had any of my pictures move, and the other advantage is when you dust, they don't move either, so that works too. So how do you protect yourself during a disaster? Well, common sense would say run, but don't. Don't run. You want to stay inside. You want to drop down, cover up, hold on until the shaking stops. Then you're going to open that door and you're going to look, because after an earthquake, you're living in a 6-sided box. What's up above, hole in the floor, walls, everything can hurt you. So you really want to pay attention. What's over my head? What could fall on me? What could I step in? What could come at me from this side, front, and back? It's all different now. Everything is a hazard until you're out of that area where something might fall or hurt you. You want to pay attention to that. During earthquakes, we've talked about this many times, drop, cover, hold on. If you can't get under something, get up against the wall, protect your head and neck and shoulders, and stay put. What we're trying to do is protect you from getting hurt while you're running, or getting hurt when something falls on you. So if you can kind of pick out those areas where you would go in any room when you're at an event. And what would I do if an earthquake happened right now? Everybody's got a table to get under. How heavy was that? You can't carry a table with you everywhere you go. So kind of eyeball those things and take a look at what you might do.
What happened to the door jam thing?
The door jam thing started with the earthquakes in the early 1800s, is the urban legend. And because a lot of those buildings were adobe brick buildings that were the wide bricks, like 12 inches wide, and the door frames, the lintel, those posts were built out of tree posts. And so the bricks on top of them, they tended to stay, and they were still standing after the earthquake, right? All the bricks are falling, but the doorway was a safe place. That's not so true anymore, is it?
Mm-mm.
And if I tried to run over here, and the earthquake happened, and this door started whacking, to be safe in a doorway, you almost need to brace yourself like this. You don't hold on like this, you're going to end up, and the door is flying, and so on. Well, you really can't. And besides, I'm one, and you're all coming at me to get in the doorway, or shoot me.
Not a good place to be.
There's no way I'm going to be safe, so I'm going to be flattened in the doorway. So it's a lot easier to just get under the table, which is a secure place, and will help protect you from any of the ceiling tiles that fall or any other hazards that are falling right now. And you don't have to go very far. You just drop down and you're there. You don't have to try to get over there in an earthquake. There's no way. Not on the slippery floor. So it's a lot easier. And the doorway thing, it's kind of, if you're in your home and that's a really safe place, you can do it, go for it. But really, we like to say drop, cover, and hold on. If that's the best option. Okay. So the main thing, we can forget about elevators right now, but all shelving. There's the store, all the stuff on the floor, stay out of the mayonnaise, the aisle. But don't walk or run outside until after the event, and then make sure that it's safe for you to do so before you go. buildings, if there's a large gathering like we have here, you want to do the same thing. You can drop down in a theater between the seats, and those seat backs will help protect you. If you can crawl under a seat, fine. I couldn't do it, but you can get down low and you can use that object as something that will help protect you. And again, don't run outside. Double check. Don't be the person who panics. Take care of yourself in those few seconds during an earthquake. Look around you and help those who are injured move to safe places, and look outside before you go. There's brick on this wall. If I were in downtown San Francisco, I probably wouldn't want to exit that way. I'd want to go out here where there's a clear path out to open ground. So be aware of where you are and what the hazards are when you're there. And this is part of that same thing about the doorway. Buildings do rarely collapse. Generally, the things that fall are the things that aren't bolted bricks or lightweight objects that fall off or fall down. So you need to protect yourself by getting under something instead of running or moving toward the wall of bookcases. Has anybody heard about the triangle of life? Flow. The triangle of life was a method of protecting oneself other than drop, cover, hold on. The idea proposed by this fellow named Dr. Kopp was that in an earthquake, you would just get down next to this table because the walls would implode and I'd be safe here, the table would catch it, and in this triangle, I would be safe. Now, do you really think so?
No.
Only there's a wall.
There's gravity. It did.
Well, if you're
Well,
under the
it-
table, you'll be safe anyway.
Yeah.
The table holds up the wall.
Well, it's your safest place. And in a place right here, there's no way this little bitty table is going to protect me from that whole wall falling in on me. But if I have ceiling tiles, which is the more likely scenario, or a light fixture, which is the more likely scenario, because schools are built to the Field Act, retrofitted for earthquakes in California, more likely I would be safer under the table. And so he began that theory based on things that he saw in other countries, such as, I think that he saw it in Mexico City, some other South American countries that do not have the same building codes that we do. And so if you're in those countries, that indeed may be something that would work for you, but you have to use your own judgment about that. But in the U.S., where we have the building codes that say, that we will mold, brace, we will retrofit, the drop, cover, hold on has actually proven itself many, many times. And so if you're more interested in reading more about it, you can go to shakeout.org and look for drop, cover, hold on or Triangle of Life on that website. And I have some shakeout flyers on the back table there by the eating bar. And it has that same information if you don't want to write it down right now. Well, after an earthquake, you can evacuate and check for injuries and check for damages. And if you're on the beach and feel any earthquake, you can gather your family members, move to high ground, and stay there, please. But also evacuate no matter how small the earthquake is, because just because it's small to you doesn't mean it's small everywhere else. You may be at the most northern end of it. Just the very fact that you feel it when you're on the beach makes a difference, and it may have been caused by something large enough to cause tsunami. So, as I said before, if you can count to 20, when you feel an earthquake, you know that that is a great earthquake, because those effects are only generated by great earthquakes lasting approximately that long. And that's based on science as well as experience, many of us. So you want to get your family members together if you can, your disaster kits, you want to go to a safe place. But if you're in a safe place already, you don't have to do anything except use your disaster kit and take care of injuries and utilities if they should be damaged in your own home. If you're downstream from a dam, and that's where the information that I provided you for looking at the maps is going to come in handy. Find out if you are downstream, I believe you are on the Klamath, and how far and how high might water reach if there were a dam failure for some reason, based on earthquake or landslide or flooding or whatever. So you want to know what those hazards are that might hit you, especially in the night when you can't actually see the hazard coming at you. And this is true both for tsunami as well as flood or dam inundation. Go as high as possible, go as high as you possibly can in the shortest amount of time. This fellow climbed this tree after the 1960 Chilean earthquake, and he survived. Obviously, that tree 40 years ago was not that big. But that was a last-ditch effort. He had nowhere to go, so he climbed a tree, and he gave himself the best chance, and he did. Okay. So there's always that option as well if you're in a low-lying area. And if you have to evacuate your flood zone, obviously you don't want to go through floodwaters, stay off of bridges that where the water is coming over the bridge, and pay attention to the barricades. I don't know how many people in low-lying areas have gone through ponded water. Even Highway 101 at Beatrice Flats near Lolita on 101 going south. There's a spot that's a dip, and it's about 2 feet deep, and people get stuck there all the time because they just don't pay attention. And CHP is just sitting there going, gotta rescue another one. Keep your family together if you can, and everybody bring their kit, and that's why it's nice, especially this time of year. I used to take the backpack my daughter didn't want to have anymore for school. She wanted a new one every year. And so sometimes I could talk her into keeping the same one, but if she didn't, and we would fill it with disaster supplies, and that was one more kit that we could have around the house, in the car, or in the garage, or she could have it for school. So if you've got extra duffel bags or backpacks, this is the great time of year to put these kits together while the kids are out of school. They can help you. That's a picture I took at one of the school gyms when we were setting up shelters. That's quite a few years ago during the flood. But if you do have to go to a shelter, both a community shelter, Red Cross shelter, any of others, you need to take your own supplies with you. When you get to the shelter at Red Cross, we used to give what we called a gift comfort kit. And it has a toothbrush and comb, toothpaste, a little bit of mouthwash, a shampoo, washcloth, and I think a razor. Sorry guys, you have to shave. And I'm trying to think there was one more thing. It'll come to me in a minute. But that's all you get. How comfortable are you going to be and for how long with that? It's a gift and it's a starter kit. But wouldn't you be so much more comfortable if you had all this stuff too? And then you didn't have to worry about asking or taking something from someone who really did need it, didn't have anything at all. It would be wonderful to have your own supplies, wouldn't it? To be able to start off that way and be comfortable. So during wildland fires, you may have already had this experience. If you need to evacuate, you can listen for the emergency information, or you will find out from neighbors and family through the grapevine. Take your pets with you, or if you can't, confine them to one room so that you know where they are. And get the movable furniture and curtains and things away from the outer windows and walls. And close your doors and windows so that you have the best possible chance of fire going over without damaging your home. So our bottom line for this part is, from segment 6, is official warning, nature's warning, don't wait. Use your own intuition, your own common sense, especially about tsunami on the beach. But respond to whichever warning you hear first. And what you hope is that you have good neighbors that will also give you that information and check on you so that we've got a buddy system. Everybody's watching everybody else's back. So let's just kind of wrap this portion up and then we'll take a little bit of a break here. When you're in your safe area, you check for injuries. Remember your planning and check for damages when you get back to your location, your home, or your work. And when you're safe, it's wanting to go backwards already. So tsunami, we've covered that. The only thing I don't think I did say was that the danger period may last up to 12 hours. I don't know if you know it or not, but tsunamis are a series of waves, and they may last for up to 12 hours. So when that event happens and you saw that ripple effect, it's just like the ripples in a pond. It's just that they're farther and farther apart because it covers the entire ocean. And it's going to create waves until the ocean retains its initial level of gravity. The water comes back to its regular level of gravity. So you're watching maybe up to 12 hours for tsunami event. So don't go to the coast to watch tsunamis, please. There was a young man who was swept off the rocks at the Mount Klamath a couple of years ago, who was a visitor to the area and thought that he was high enough. He was not. And he was swept off the rocks when the water swirled around and came up like a sneaker wave and knocked him off. And he was with friends who did survive. But his body was found in Oregon with the coast, with the, just lost the word. What's that called? The current moved him. Yes, thank you. You win the prize. Senior moment there. All righty. So, and then also for earthquakes, a lot of this has been covered already in our materials, but if you have a way of communicating with your friends and neighbors, that's a good thing. And I think the word of mouth for Happy Camp is one of the best, because everybody knows where everybody should be at the time. And it's a good thing because you have locations where you would check the schools, or you would check the restaurant, or the church, or whatever, to be sure that everybody's okay. And if they're not, if you don't see somebody, then you know who you need to check on and what to do now. And after floods, obviously, stay out of the flooded area. You, in this particular area, may have wildlife coming to visit you, particularly if they're looking for high ground. So before you go back in, double check and make sure the snakes and the raccoons and the foxes and all the other little critters have not moved in to take up residence at your house too. And once you've gone through a wildland fire, especially if you've had to evacuate, double check everything at your place. Make sure that everything is okay before you move it back in. And that your utilities, lifelines, your propane tanks, or other solar panels are in good shape and working before you take up residence again. And in most cases, no power in the other areas. We check the main breaker here. You might want to check your lifelines from your propane or from other sources of energy. So what we talked about is hazards. So what does that mean for you as a CERT team member? Well, if you're already involved in preparedness. You're already involved in your community because you're sitting here and you've heard about it either through Neighborhood Watch, through the school, or Doreen called and hounded you. She's not here, I can say that. Bless her heart, she is a mover and shaker, isn't she? She's great. She wants everybody to be safe. But I think she's got the greater community at heart and in mind, because the more people that are participating, the less work for everybody else. And you also have the potential here for building something to be quite self-sufficient no matter what the hazard or what the event can be. So the plan is that everybody knows everything everybody else knows, and that you all have been trained so that you're interchangeable with those jobs, right? And you also have the skills, but you start building the resource tools that you need to do those jobs. And so be thinking about what tools you have at home already. And other tools I'm thinking about are knowledge power, people who can do administrative and paperwork kinds of things, tracking things, because you do have the potential, especially with public buildings like the school, recovering some costs if you track and document those after a fire, after an earthquake, all those kinds of things can be submitted for reimbursements. So those things also are a tool for somebody who has that information and knowledge and ability to do that. And then you're already getting some training. You're getting CERT training, so you can have CPR and first aid, and I recommend that everybody have that. You can also do some drills and exercises, and I think David's already, I've seen you writing all this module. You're really taking notes there. Are you getting some good ideas for things we could train people on? Some traffic control and some additional things for fighting fire, all of that. And then talk to your friends and family about volunteering as well. You don't want to be the only one on this team, right? So what CERT teams can do is respond, first of all, in your own neighborhood. And your neighborhood may be a 5-mile stretch of road. but you check on one another. If you see something unusual, the mail's piling up in the mailbox, you wonder what's going on with that family if you know that they're not on vacation or out of town. So you want to assist your first responders, who may be you actually, but it would be nice if everybody else could help you when you're responding. And your first responsibility as a CERT team member is to yourself and to your family to make sure you're okay, that you stay safe. Because without that, we don't have you as a CERT team member, do we? So personal safety and taking care of yourself and your family is really critical. It's an important piece of being a CERT team member, is knowing that you've got a buddy system and that you've got somebody also looking out for you and taking care, and you are taking care of yourself as well. So disaster response includes responding to disaster, knowing how to shut off utilities. We're going to learn how to do that if you don't know it already. Extinguishing small fires, how to take care of injuries. Conducting the light search and rescue, and then our disaster psychology talks about survivor stress and the kinds of things that you might encounter and some of the ways that you might also alleviate that survivor stress and the trauma affected or caused by a disaster and how you might be affected. So as I said earlier, some of the things that you're going to get will be the helmet, the vest, knee pads, mask, goggles that go on the floor, the backpack, and gloves and a flashlight. And all of that comes courtesy of California Volunteers, which administers this program in California. And I was just at the statewide advisory committee. I represent the 5 counties of Northern California for Siskiyou, Trinity, Encino, Humboldt, and Del Norte. Sorry, yeah, there's another. And we talked about the kinds of things that people need in their kits. And I really fought hard for these basic items because some of the larger city programs are saying, well, we can get donations of flashlights from Home Depot. I go, we don't have a Home Depot. Well, we could get lots of these things. We could get the knee pads and the masks and the goggles from Lowe's or from the big sporting goods. We don't have that. So they forget sometimes that we're operating on basics here, homegrown stores, and those business owners can't always afford to donate thousands and thousands of items like the bigger companies can. So California Volunteers has been wonderful about providing this material for us. And I really want to thank them and have you know that, because that means at the state level they are trying to support all of you becoming responders for your own families and neighborhoods, and assisting not only yourselves, but the first responders that are out there doing this every single day. And this is another way that our fire, law enforcement, EMS personnel know who you are. They know that you have sat through 23 hours of training. You have listened to Linda talk for 4 hours now today, 2 more to come, and they know that you have, if you have a certificate, that means something, that you've had that skills training, that we've checked that off, and that you know what you're doing as far as this baseline of training. And then if you've got additional certificates for training, that would be better. I'm happy for you there. But the state and local governments also know that this means something, and that they can trust that you will do the right action because you have been trained to do so. And so there's the connection that has been missing, in my opinion, for years, was that the local citizens who are doing this training are now connected. David's going to know about you. You, OES will know about you. I know about you in Humboldt County. I know all of the teams in all 5 counties. And we're beginning to map them and saying, we are building something here that means that we can take care of ourselves and request resources at the time needed, but appropriately, without duplication, and they will trust that. They can trust that system because they know that you know what you need, and you've already done your homework about figuring out what resources are available right here. My soapbox now. Okay. Your protection, which David has just given you also as a disaster service worker for the county of Siskiyou, also is you are a good Samaritan. I believe I talked a little bit about that earlier on.
But the Good Samaritan Law is the Volunteer Protection Act of 1997, saying that as a person on the street, if you assist at any event where you've used skills that you've been trained to do, and you help someone, you are protected from lawsuit and from further harm by the Volunteer Protection Act. That doesn't mean that you can't be sued. Some people have been, but I'm not aware that anybody has ever been sued successfully under the Good Samaritan Law if you did that activity according to the training that you received and you did it in good faith. And here's the important piece. You did not accept any money, goods, or other services in exchange for that action. You did it purely out of the goodness of your heart as a Good Samaritan helping somebody else. And so that protects you.
Those late birds, we'll need to score them in at the end of the class.
Say again.
Late birds that got here late,
Oh, yes.
we'll
Okay.
take care of that.
David will
By the end
spare
of
in
class.
those who just arrived after class.
That Good Samaritan thing goes past, you don't have to retrain.
In about 2 seconds.
I'm sorry, what?
The Good Samaritan law, you don't have to be like, say, trained in CPR to stop and help. The Good Samaritan law helps anybody, it doesn't matter if you're trained or not, I believe.
Yes.
Correct, but the other thing that she was talking about on the CERT training and the disaster service worker also protects you with workers' compensation should you get hurt during that. That's why we need to fill out that one form, and I need to swear you guys in. They came late after we'd already done that at the start.
Okay. And we can answer more questions. And then additional trainings that, these are things that we've already thought about, and then maybe other things that you think about that are specific to this area that you would like to have. And I would certainly like to hear those suggestions, and I know David would too, because he's going to assist us with some additional training ongoing. So first aid animal issues, there's a module that CERT teaches about assisting with large animals, rescues, how to deal with and help owners of large animals during rescues, how to use an AED, automated external defibrillator. You get that generally with CPR training. Donations management, and that's talking about what about in some of the larger areas like our chapter in Red Cross and Humboldt used to get bags and bags of stuff on the doorstep that we could not use. We do not have a thrift shop. We do not have any donations management ability. Whereas, St. Vincent de Paul had a thrift store. They had a warehouse. They could handle all that stuff. But people didn't ask first, so the word needs to be put out about how to manage donations, both for clothing, food, resources that might come to your community. If you were, a truckload of stuff came to you, how would you deal with it? You might bring it into this very room, sort it out, and then figure out which families needed those things. But if you can do that ahead of time and have something in place for a plan, it's a lot simpler, fewer headaches, a whole lot less stress, definitely. Some of the other things you could learn to do are special needs concerns. If you have somebody with a CNA, so if you have special skills and abilities in dealing with people who might have special needs for care, that would be an excellent training to do, what to do, how to do some lists, how to help folks who might have other developmentally are developmentally disabled or have mobility problems that might be addressed if you have a shelter set up here. Crowd control, we all know each other, you can say, don't do that. Utilities control, how to shut off those propanes, do a neighborhood assessment of where are the shutoffs for that propane tank, what's in the tank, good to know. And then there are some online courses like the ICS 100, 200, 700 that teach the state level and the federal level responses and how you might fit into those things. Okay, so now you should know your roles and responsibilities, at least as a CERT trained member, what you can do for your own community preparedness and how you fit into that. And also the kinds of hazards we've talked about, all that, and kind of beaten that to death, haven't we? Fires, floods, earthquakes, and so on. And now you're also going to undertake all your personal preparedness, right? And then you're going to get some additional training. So you've had a good 3.5 hours of basics for that. So So any questions so far? Any other item that came up? And I neglected to say that these little yellow post-it notes were for you to take notes and to remember to ask me that question at the end of this. Seeing nobody writing those down,
I'm going to release you to go to dinner now because I'm going to start the second module, but I think everybody needs about a half-hour break, don't you think? I want to see everybody do jumping jacks.
Yeah.
We're going to, I'm not getting any enthusiasm.